Now, y'all look money hungry, and that's good.
Do I have your full attention?
Anybody tells you money's the root of all evil doesn't fucking have it.
What? People stop markets. Mystery beyond understanding.
They say money can't buy happiness. Look at the fucking smile on my face. Ear to ear, baby.
Hello and welcome to the third episode of The Root of All Evil. My name is Devilmaycare.
I am Mammon.
And tonight we have a very special guest, a Reverend of the Church of Satan. I would like to introduce Eric Vernor. Eric, welcome to the show.
Welcome, guys. I really appreciate you having me on.
So where would you like to start?
Well, I guess take it from the top of your questions you guys passed my way. I was really intrigued by some of your perspectives, and I'm really eager to get right into the diversity of the questions you have for me.
All right.
We definitely knew we had to have you on because, I mean, what our show is about is right up your alley. This is stuff that you write about often. For example, you talk about your past in your books quite a lot. For the listeners who are unfamiliar, can you tell us where you came from and what you've been through?
Well, I guess I just took it all in stride and figure my life is, quote, normal. But the more I became self-aware in perspective to other people, that I really had a kind of a shitty life growing up. And, what I usually did was just kind of bury, the bad stuff. And I wanted to focus on, the fact that I overcame, mental issues because I have Asperger's syndrome. It's kind of a high-functioning autism, and they gave me social behavior issues. Like it's hard to relate to a lot of other people. I didn't think like they did, and like to tell most people what it's like. If you ever see The Big Bang Theory, Sheldon's character is based off somebody who's an Aspie. Mm-hmm. And, they don't really relate to people. It's kind of funny. In Satanism, I guess you could compare it to, it's the alien elite, where we're not like everybody else, and we think we're a little bit more superior when it comes to our own single-minded focus on the things that we're interested in. So I just kind of turned to what my path is by instinct. And, I came from drug addict parents, alcoholics, and, foster care. I was homeless for a while. Well, just a lot of bad stuff. And, instead of just wallowing in self-pity and saying, oh, the government didn't take care of me and mommy and daddy were mean to me, I took it as shit happens and get over it and learn how to compensate for your problems and your issues. And that's what I think in some ways led me to be different, is I focused on getting past the difficulties instead of whining about them. So, that led me into a lot of different interests, being an introvert. I think that my curiosity factor and not wanting to be that much of a people person caused me to research a lot of weird topics and self-growth. So, I think I turned to being an author for a living because I would, do it behind the keyboard and never have to go out in public. But that was short-sighted of me, honestly, because if you don't get out there and meet people and speak in public, which used to horrify me, you don't eat for a living if you can't let people know what you do, So now I'm a public speaker as well in front of hundreds to thousands a year.
Yeah. That's interesting, and it brings up something I heard recently. A lot of people who are, self-motivational speakers always talk about doing what you love and following your passion. But one thing that they don't talk about very often is doing what you hate. And it's finding those things that are difficult for you and being able to overcome them is what allows us to grow as a person and become successful.
Yeah, I would agree. But, to some degree, I was thinking about that a few days ago of how do I work that into my story that that I tell people on stage so I'm relatable, because part of me doesn't feel like I'm like everybody else. But at the same time, it's like, you know what? I kind of am. I'm just more honest about it. That if I can't stand in front of other people and say I've had a screwed up life and yet I overcame it, how can I justify telling other people how to overcome things in their lives if they don't think I can relate to them?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, Eric, you always have stuff going on. I follow you on Facebook, and you're always writing books. You're making jewelry. You're painting. How do you keep yourself organized, and how do you manage your time?
Again, those were things that I had a lot of difficulty with, and I had trouble focusing. My ADD. So I had to learn to prioritize things. I had to learn time management, and that's one of the things I even wrote a chapter about in one of my books. Is I had to learn the different tricks and techniques to save time and still accomplish everything I wanted to do, because my brain is just all over the place, and yet I get things done, so people see me as really accomplished. But it's not just because I'm driven. That's part of it. I'm self-motivated because I want to accomplish a lot. I want to leave a legacy behind me. But at the same time, I had to master it better by learning how to juggle my time. I had to learn to keep my cell phone off, check email only once or twice a day instead of every time I got a notification that I had to go check to see what it was. Or the paranoia of being a business person, that when you get a message, you think you have to respond to everybody immediately, or you tell your employees, I'll always be there for you, just call me. I learned the hard way that just made me more scattered and unfocused, and I wasn't really there for people as much as I needed because I was never getting anything done. But when you tell people that you're always there, that you're basically giving them permission to bug the shit out of you. And you're not as hyper-focused on what their needs are, because you're just dropping everything, and will take you away from being able to dedicate a moment for them. So I had to learn that, scheduling calls and interviews, and when people would need me for problems, and I needed to dedicate a chunk of my time for damage control or coaching people or whatnot. And then I noticed my life was actually smoothing out. So, all these things that I tell other people to do, it's not because I'm, world-class expert. It's because I had to learn them for myself, and I'm just sharing what I found out.
Makes sense.
Definitely relatable.
I think I accomplished a lot because I want to leave a legacy behind me to prove that I did something, that I existed for a reason, and simply, because it's my own curiosity factor on so many different topics. And that's why you'll notice in my catalog of book titles on Amazon, I go from one severe extreme to another of money and wealth, all the way to, the academic study of zombies, and, it's like, yeah, I'm a little out there and over, from one thing to another, but that's because I have so many different things that fascinate me and I'm curious. So when I research it, I'm like, oh, look what I learned today,
Yeah.
It's not because I want to be an expert on everything. It's because my mind is always wandering, and I turn it into a book.
Do you have any tips or pointers for the listeners out there on time management?
Yes. Make lists, prioritize, and learn to shut your electronics off and have a set time frame which you do things so you can focus at each moment on everything. Give it your all. Eliminate the small things that you can get done first. I learned that will help more than anything, because if you see your problems as everything, you're going to be overwhelmed. You're going to think you have to fix everything when you don't. You take care of the small things, and then the things that are of most critical demands of your attention. Think to yourself, if I don't accomplish 5 different things, what are the 3 things that must be done that will cause me more pain and problems later if I don't do them right away? So it's more about knowing which are the biggest things that could snowball into something really bad for you. So do those first, and the other small stuff will take care of itself. That isn't just something that you can take care of in a second. I think doing those things, the big and the small, and then the middle sort of things you can do tomorrow.
I like it. I always have
Definitely.
a hard time trying to explain time management to other people. It's something that has always come really easy to me, and it's so simple that it's hard to explain. Personally, I have a dumping ground where any idea, any thought, any task, I send myself emails, and other people are always sending me emails. And then twice a day I go through them, and if it's something where it's an actionable task, I schedule it. I put it on the schedule, and when it's time to get it done, I get it done. And that's it. That's all I do.
Well, like you guys say, I have a lot going on. I accomplish quite a bit, and yet I have ADD. So, people are like, "How do you remember to get things done?" I'm kind of feeling
write it
guilty,
down.
thinking that I don't all the time, but sticky notes help immensely, and I carry those really small, like 2x4 spiral bound notepads and a pen in my back pocket, and you have messages you can send yourself on your cell phone, and if you know something's critical, you can make a note of it and prioritize it and get back to it, as opposed to just spacing it and go, oh, I forgot, because other people don't understand, they don't care.
I think a lot of it's laziness too. It's habit. I think habit's probably a better word than laziness. People are used to spending, so many hours watching TV or so many hours playing video games. And not that there's anything intrinsically wrong with those activities, but when you put off the things that need to be accomplished to accomplish your dreams, to play a video game or to, watch the latest Game of Thrones or whatever, you're doing yourself a disservice.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I don't mind binge watching a little bit if I deserve a break, and catch up on a favorite show or something like that. But I'll do it in chunks during the week when I know I've gotten most of my big critical things for the week or the month out of the way, or unwind after a long road trip or something, or a business meeting. But you get the important stuff out of the way first. And, I don't do video games, for one. And there's not a lot of shows that I watch. So, I guess for me, the harder part was the internet and, being hammered with social media requests constantly. So I learned to put myself on invisible, just to my friends seeing me on, because this isn't about ego, but it's a reality. When you've written 30 books and spoken all over the country month after month for 13 years, you develop a fan base, and they constantly want to ask you questions. And if you get those certain people, I'll say, that see you on, they'll want to ask you like 100 questions about one topic. And it's like, guys, I wrote a book on that. You should go buy it.
Have you ever actually responded with that to somebody?
I did have to after a while. I did it tactfully, at least in my mind. And it's like, look, guys, I spent years, 4 or 5 years researching this topic, and I put it all in a 300-page book. So, if you don't mind, read the book first, then come to me with deeper probing questions, but don't ask me the little stuff when I actually do it for a living. And that'll either make people realize that, oh, yeah, he should be paid for what he knows, or, if they're just, to be blunt, rude pricks, then they're just going to go away, but people have to acknowledge your time, your expertise, and don't treat you like, you're at their beck and call constantly for, I'm not everybody's guru unless I'm being paid for it. I hate saying that, but that's the blunt reality. If you don't value your time, then why should you be paid at all for what your skills are? And that goes for anybody.
You've mentioned accomplishments and leaving behind a legacy. Could you tell us a little bit about your legacy with Dark Moon Press and Limitless Potential Group?
Well, Dark Moon Press started about 14 years ago when I self-published Embracing the Darkness, where I interviewed people that lived or the leaders of certain social identity groups like Satanists and pagans and Goths and everything, because I was curious, about those fringe identity groups. I was basically a dark historian, and I loved the subcultures. It fascinated me, that side of people's psyche. And I put it out in a book, and I put an imprint on it, and this was before print on demand. And I had to pay for 1,000 books, and they were just sitting in a garage, and tons of them. And I learned how to market and put things out there, and I taught myself from the ground up on how to be a publisher, and it just sort of grew into other books by me, and then friends found out that I published, and then it became an imprint, a small press, so it just kind of organically grew into a company all of its own. And as far as Limitless goes, all of my speakers other than me are authors for me, and I've met them over the years at different conventions. Like the Buddhist and I would be talking about world religion and how we have a similar thinking process and being realists, and so we'd share the stage, and I'd see the faces of the people light up, and basically I turned to explaining Satanism in more layman's terms without the spooky trappings. And they'd be like, "Oh, well, that's just common sense," And,
Yeah.
And I realized that the more I did it, and somebody even commented on Amazon for the Hail Thyself book, and they're like, "You're the satanic Tony Robbins." And so I started researching more on Robbins, and I thought, you know what? This guy says he's Christian, but the stuff he's spouting about personal responsibility and focusing on yourself, I'm like, he's more satanic than he wants to realize. I started to realize that what I was really doing on the side when I was teaching people principles of Satanism, and I would teach them how to be successful as a writer, because that became a course I offered online, that I was actually being a traditional motivational speaker to my audience, and I was getting more sales when I steered away from just the spooky niche market of topics and audience. And I thought, you know what, there's money in this. There's people that actually will benefit from what I've learned the hard way. And I had overcome my public speaking issues. And, I just sort of started learning that as a new business. And so Limitless Potential was born by me bringing in other experts on emotional problems and finance and, stuff like that. So we're not even officially launched yet, but we've got a website being built. We've got marketing going on. We've got videos being filmed by our speakers all over the country to, get the highlight clips of us in action. We've already got agreements with several universities now to go talk to the kids, on topics that people like you and I grew up with, like dressing for success and networking and, all the things that kids apparently these days don't even have a clue how to get themselves ahead now that they have a degree.
Well, I didn't have a clue when I was younger. Nobody taught me that kind of stuff. I had to go figure it out myself. And
Yeah, who did?
I don't know. I guess it depends on where you grew up and how you grew up and how much money your parents had when you grew up. But for a lot of people, they have no clue how to network. They don't even necessarily know what that means.
I guess you could say that my background being so diverse kind of helped me there. I turned my problems and my successes into advantages for myself because, like I said, I had alcoholics and drug addicts for parents, yet their parents were wealthy and successful lawyers, doctors, whatnot. So I got to see the advantages and disadvantages of life's choices. And so it gave me a clear idea of what I did not want to be myself. And the other examples were what people that were successful lived like instead. So I think that helped gave me a clear idea of what choices can do for you in one direction or the other.
So what are some of the common pitfalls you see that hinder people's success?
They let their baggage and their fears get in their way of success. I think that we're afraid of being successful. Well, we see it as, well, my family hasn't done this, or what if I fail? Not thinking of the fact that not trying at all is the biggest failure of anything. Successful people fail constantly. They learn from it. They grow. They adapt. They ask questions. They ask better questions and dig until they find out how to do something the correct way.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the key words there is adapt.
Yeah, definitely.
Being able to adapt to different situations is, in my opinion, really what separates the successful from the masses. Eric, I know you've talked about failure. I've been through my fair share of failure, and you adapt to the situation and you figure out how to fix it, and that's, like I said, that's what separates the successful from the masses. The masses take their situation, whatever it may be, and they learn to accept it. And this is how my life is. I'm poor. I'm middle class. I'm ugly. Whatever their situation may be, they just, it is what it is, and they accept it and they learn how to live with it. I think the successful, in opposition to that, say, this is my situation. I'm poor. I'm ugly. I'm disadvantaged. I have Asperger's syndrome. Whatever the case may be, they take that fact and then they say, but here's how I'm going to make my life into what I want it to be anyways.
Exactly.
You're not defined by what your past was or your bad choices. There are consequences for those things. They have an effect on you, but it doesn't mean you have to live there. It means those are your issues. Now, how the hell are you going to overcome them? How are you going to accomplish despite them?
Yeah.
And I think most people can't get past that. They have this identity, the story they tell themselves of who they are and how they're always going to be stuck. And I refuse to settle. I refuse to have that be my life, because I know what I want. And I think that's what successful people do, is they have a goal. They know where they're going to go. They laser focus target at it, and they're relentless until they learn everything they need. And to be honest, I had somebody criticize me on social media when they're like, well, how can you write about being a millionaire when you don't have $1 million? And I said, well, I went from homeless to living in a $250,000 neighborhood. I must be doing something right. And I'm applying those same principles of the people that are well-to-do, and I have mentors. That's the whole idea of the title, The Sixth Millionaire, is if you have 5 millionaire friends, you're bound to become the sixth, because we are most like the people that we have in our lives. If you have shitty people in your life, get rid of them. Surround yourself with better people that are more advanced than you, that you can learn from, that can inspire and motivate you to become more like them. Learn their tricks, learn their secrets, because secrets leave clues on how people got where they are. You don't have to know them even. You can study them in books, read biographies of like Steve Jobs, Gene Simmons, Oprah. Anybody who's a household name, P. Diddy. If you know their name, they're somebody, and they have a story. You can learn from watching YouTube videos. I used to do that at night when I worked at a hotel. I was bored, and I'd be making money at my night job while writing books, but at the same time in the background I'd have videos playing of interviews of successful people on the path that they took. And there's no excuse to say that I don't have the resources. Well, no, what the reality is, you're not resourceful enough to go get the answers that you claim you don't have.
Yeah. That part about the 6 millionaire really spoke to me too, because that was my scenario. I knew what I wanted to be. I knew I wasn't it yet. And I knew that I was very much the sixth person in a group of 5 people I didn't want to emulate. So once I made that connection and was like, you know what, I've got to cut ties. And it was sad. And I mean, there was the time where it's like, hey, where you been, man? Haven't heard from you. And it's like, yeah, it's because you're exactly where I left you.
Right. What's sad is people sometimes the biggest person that hold them back is not only just themselves. That's clear, but it's our friends, it's our closest family members. They'll sometimes caution us to, hey, don't do that. Well, they're afraid that you'll leave them behind, and you will, because they're so used to being how they are that when they see something pull away from the pack and doing something better, they don't want to lose you. They don't want to be alone, and misery loves company.
Exactly.
You know, it's what they call learned helplessness, and that's why everybody else lives shitty, because they're not willing to look at their flaws and problems and overcome them. So that's what the masses are like. The successful 5% of the world think differently. That's why they don't live that way. But not everybody knows people like that. So it can be difficult breaking old patterns and learning those other traits. And I've got an entire chapter in this book on how poor people think versus rich people and how you can change your mindset, because that's the biggest hurdle, is changing how you think in order to behave and act and make choices like the people that are successful. The first half of the whole book is, here's your issues, here's what's wrong with your thinking, here's what you're doing wrong, here's your bad spending habits, here's how to build your credit back up, get multiple jobs if you need to, learn passive income streams, all the tricks and techniques I've learned, other people have been doing for decades. Entire generations of wealthy families just grew up knowing this stuff, but most people don't.
You mentioned Tony Robbins earlier, and Tony Robbins has often said that success leaves clues, and it's true.
Yes.
It's absolutely true. Success rarely, other than like the rare exceptions of the lottery, does not fall into somebody's lap. They work for it, they go out, they earn it, and there's clues on how they did that, and they're everywhere. They're everywhere. You just need to open your eyes and look for them.
Right. And that's why I said find mentors, people to teach you, because whether you know them in person or you read their biographies and figure out what they did differently, not making the same mistakes again and again and learning from other people's flaws is probably the biggest tip I can give, because if you're not doing damage control and correcting things all the time, then you're on a better path. It's better not to screw up in the first place, is what I'm saying. If somebody can guide you around the issues, although there may not be a shortcut to success, there certainly is a longer route that you want to avoid. And that's why I say learn from better people.
I know that route, by the way.
Yeah.
Eric,
I know 4 millionaires right now, so I guess I just need to meet one more.
Eric, what would you say are some of the common characteristics of successful people that you've observed?
Being self-aware, knowing where you fall in the reality of the people around you, and figuring out what you're missing, what you don't know, because that's one of the big issues. People don't know what they don't know. And that sounds convoluted, but the best way I can explain it is, if you don't know what you're doing wrong or how to use proper techniques, you don't know where to self-correct your course. So successful people are ambitious. They have certain qualities about them, but other people can get that way too. It just may be a little more difficult for them. But you have to be focused. You have to have goals. You have to learn time management. And, something clicked when I was researching the book. It's like Oprah and all these other multi-billionaires, they have the same amount of hours in their day as anybody else. It's how they utilize them that matters, that change their lives. So being self-aware and learning what they need to know, being motivated, self-educated, asking questions, not just assuming they already know everything. Those are the biggest traits of successful people.
You mentioned time. I was just saying earlier today that you will never have more time than you do right now. It's
right.
One of the biggest excuses I hear is when people are talking about why they aren't more successful, or is I don't have time. And it's a lie. I mean, just flat out, it's a lie. I know plenty of people with, 4 or 5 kids and 2 jobs, and they're still out there making things happen. Or, they have families and multiple businesses. And I mean, for God's sakes, look at God's sakes. I just said that on a satanic. but look at
It still works.
Look at Elon Musk. I mean, how many businesses is he running?
I don't know, something like 16.
It's ridiculous. And, he has the exact same 24 hours a day that we do. So
Right.
that I don't have time excuse, if you're listening to this and you use that, stop. Just stop.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very true.
Definitely.
Let's switch gears a little bit. You talked about different streams of passive income, and one thing that's been in the news a lot, and by a lot I mean probably 24/7, is Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Eric, what are your thoughts on Bitcoin?
The first most obvious thing is I wish I would have invested $1,000 into it when it started, and I'd be retired already.
Pretty much.
I think it's a little too late to jump on its bandwagon now, because the price is up so high that eventually it's going to bottom out. But I think what we should learn from it is sometimes you have to take a small risk with not what's going to keep your rent paid, but anything extra that you happen to spare. Invest in certain small opportunities, because you never know how things like stocks or Bitcoin is going to enhance your life later on. Don't invest a lot, because only invest what you can afford to lose. That way, you're not damaging yourself. But if it turns into something that snowballs, then you catch a windfall and sock it away and invest that profits into other profits.
That's definitely solid advice that I would give.
Anything you'd want to add, Mammon?
Basically, I always tell people to have a plan. That's the most part when you're talking about Bitcoin or anything. You just got to have a plan, and I think Eric just summed it up nicely. Don't do more than you can afford to lose. Don't go crazy. Don't chase elephants. Just take your base hits and take the money and run.
It's one of the things I tried to explain to people early on when I started writing this the 6 Millionaire book. Is it's not a get-rich-quick book. It's not one for people that already have money to know how to become wealthy. I wanted to write this from a layman's perspective of what the hell do you do if you're broke and want to become rich and don't even have money to, you hear all these people that say, well, don't drink at Starbucks. And I'm like, well, what if you don't have money to do that in the first place and you still want to get out of your problem? This book was truly created for people that had nothing, that still want to get out of their problems, and then once they course correct, then they can go beyond that, and then it just slowly grows. Because just like my own life, when you figure out what you're doing wrong and you keep making slow, steady improvements and you grow from it, and you keep doing that same rinse and repeat pattern, you're bound to become better off.
Yeah. I don't think anybody has ever gotten rich off the don't drink at Starbucks advice.
Yeah.
You don't get...
honestly, the goal is not to spend no money. The goal is to just bring in more, so that the little things you do don't affect you that much. And a lot of people can't wrap their heads around that.
Yeah, exactly.
Back to Bitcoin, I had a few things I wanted to talk about when it comes to not only Bitcoin, but just investments in general. There's a few filters that I always pass any investments through, and I wanted to share them. The first one is I always ask myself, is this a tulip? And what I mean by a tulip is in 1637, tulip prices went absolutely, and I'm talking about tulip bulbs, they bubbled and then crashed. And when you think of a tulip, it has no utility value. There's nothing you can really do with a tulip other than grow it and it looks pretty. But it has no real value, yet the price on it, spiked and then crashed right afterwards. So I always ask myself, is this going to be a tulip? And when it comes to Bitcoin, I don't know the answer to that question.
Right.
Bitcoin is one of those things where it either is a tulip or it does have a utility with the blockchain and how that works. And whether or not it's going to eventually become a world currency, I just simply don't know the answer to that question.
I don't think it will be.
You don't?
The Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Nah, I don't. Nah. I mean, it is and it isn't already. But at the same time, it's exactly like you said. Is it a tulip? Because if it is, then it's definitely not going to be a world currency.
Right, but is it? I don't know. It could go either way.
I'm wondering if we're going to hear stories about people making just as much money on its way down as the ones who made it on the way up. Like, are people going to start shorting it so much, if it can even be sold on margin yet, which I'm not sure. But if that's a thing, then man, there's going to be people hitting it coming in.
Yeah, it cannot be sold on margin yet, from what I understand, but it's coming soon. The other filter I run investments through is, does it make money? When you invest in a business or you invest in real estate or something like that, you're investing in something that's already making money. It's out there churning money. It's printing money. If it's a good business anyways, or good real estate. And so I always take that into consideration when I make an investment. Is this thing making money? And then the last thing I think about is it a good price? And with both of those filters, does it make money? I mean, Bitcoin does not make money. It is money.
Right.
But with the third filter, is it a good price? I have nothing to compare it to, and no way to put a value on a Bitcoin. With something like a foreign currency, you can look at a historical pattern and kind of say, well, yeah, it's been worth this much for so long, and here's the logical reasons why I think it'll be worth X in the future. I'm completely unable to do that with Bitcoin right now.
It's interesting to note that the big boys like Warren Buffett and Jamie Dimon have spoken against it so many times. I'm curious why the people at the very, very top of the financial world are against this. Is it for a reason, or is it what is that reason? Are they just paranoid that it's going to undermine what they're doing? Who knows? It'll just be a fun financial soap opera to watch.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I don't know I think they don't like the idea of a blockchain because it's not run through a financial institution. You can't make interest on it. But on that,
and it's not going through their banks.
Right, exactly. But
I guess you have to look at it of what's in it for them and how do they gain and lose. I mean, I didn't at first. I was going to include it in the chapter on going from red to black. In financial terms of, once you're out of debt, what do you do? But it was so new to me, and it may be just a fad sort of thing, that I didn't include it when I was talking about stocks and investments, because what I did pass on in the book was things that I learned that I could understand, and I didn't want to bog the book down by every single new facet, that I didn't understand, because I'm not going to tell people I know something that I know nothing about.
I think that's important, is understanding. You can't be investing if you don't understand the investment. If you're purchasing something that you don't understand, you're not investing, you're speculating. You might as well go to Vegas because it's the same thing.
Exactly.
So, yeah, you shouldn't be putting your money into anything that you don't understand.
I was going to say, always find an expert in something and get a second opinion even when you have that, because, too many people jump on what they get excited about and read, just one story, one article, and then they lose everything. They wonder why. I mean, just because somebody claims to be an expert and has made a lot of money at one thing doesn't mean you're going to.
Fact.
And something else to keep in mind, and something our listeners can definitely identify with, it doesn't take long for a good idea to get people to ride its coattails. So if you're already looking at Bitcoin, there's already a couple out there that are not really the legit Bitcoin or the legit pot stocks. and they could be just riding the coattails of the original stock, and they might just falter, and it might have nothing to do with the one that you thought you were getting into. So definitely take the time to look exactly into what your research, what you're investing in. Do the research. It's probably the most important part.
I cannot emphasize or re-emphasize that point enough. Do your research, do your research, do your research, do your research. It doesn't matter where the advice is coming from, whether it's, a financial advisor or Warren Buffett or Elon Musk or Peter Thiel or whoever. Don't just take their word for it. That's stupidity in action. But I mean, listen, think, and put the research into it. And if you decide it's a good decision, then act on it.
Right. I consult other people. I read articles. I never thought myself the kind of guy who would be searching out deliberately, Success Magazine or Forbes or Fortune articles, but the more I did, the more I realized there's a lot I didn't know. And, I'll just do it randomly to pick up on things, to expand my knowledge base.
It definitely never hurts. You've never heard anyone say, "Man, I wish I didn't know so much about this topic."
When I was growing up, it never interested me. I was more the creative type. And then once I realized that I'm turning my creativity into businesses, I had to learn the business side of life. And, you can be more creative when you have more money.
You can do a lot more of a lot of things when you have more money. And that's one of the things that a lot of people just don't seem to understand. That drives me absolutely bonkers. I hate the rich. Rich are horrible people. They just have more money. I mean, people tend to be horrible.
It's a tool. It's a tool. It's how are you using it properly or improperly, or it's only going to enhance what you are. If you're generous, you're going to be more generous. If you're a greedy asshole, you're going to be more of that. So, I think it gets a bad rap for being what it is, but everybody needs it.
Yeah,
exactly. And you couldn't be more right about it. It's only going to enhance your inner self. I mean, look at Elon Musk and look at that 28-year-old kid that was in charge of the drug pharmaceutical company. They both have tons and tons of money. Look what they're doing with it. So it's definitely not a war against the rich. That's just an entire notion based out of jealousy. And trust me, we've all felt that jealousy, and many of us still do. But the point is, just because you have, a bank account that looks like a social security number doesn't mean that you have to turn around and, be Hitler. You can be just as nice as you want to be, and you can just do it in a Ferrari instead of a Pinto.
Well, yeah, and that's a quote that I kind of put in the book in the beginning. It's like, they say money doesn't fix everything, but I'd rather be crying on a yacht than out homeless in the winter like I was years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're going to have a war on something, don't have a war on the rich. That's retarded. Have a war on assholes or something,
Yeah.
Did anybody poor ever give you a job?
But yeah, maybe, but in exchange for the drugs you were selling them. That's a different kind of job, though.
Yeah.
Eric, obviously, long-standing member of the Church of Satan. How old were you when you discovered you were a Satanist, and what impact has it had on your success and your businesses?
I'd say I was in my late 20s, early 30s when I first discovered Satanism. And like everybody else in the beginning, I was like, it's those freaks that were on Geraldo or whatever. And the more I got into it and actually learning beyond the spooky trappings, I realized that it's one of the biggest philosophies on the planet that are about responsibility, accountability, and success. Satanism to me is the ultimate self-help, because it's kind of like when you're on an airplane and they say put your own oxygen mask on first, then your kids, because you're no good to anybody else you claim to care about if you don't put yourself first. If you're a parent, you can't feed your kids if you don't take care of your health to keep your job. So for me it was vital, because I was the type who was so generous, gave the shirt off my back, I was a doormat, and then I realized I didn't like being that way, and I wasn't really helping people by giving up everything. So to me the path was one of course correction, and it just sort of slowly began enhancing everything else.
Yep, I know all about the course correction. I know all about people being a doormat too. I know too many doormats. Stop it.
Yeah, if you say yes to everybody about everything, it limits your resources to truly do good for the people that you really want to.
Exactly. That's a brilliant point.
I guess if you really enjoy being a doormat, then don't stop it. But I don't. I don't know too many people who do. You know, they feel taken advantage of all the time, and I can't imagine that's a great way to feel. So cut it out.
No. Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Unless you're a masochist, you know, and in which case, then you're pretty much set because it's easier to be a doormat than it is to be the one, you know, doing the stepping and the walking on.
Yeah. Eric, what's one of your favorite? Actually, what is your favorite self-help book
that you haven't written?
Well, I'd honestly say one of the early books that really got me thinking of how to improve my life is not in the self-help genre that I can think of. It's more historical. Is Green's The 48 Laws of Power.
Great book.
Mm-hmm.
Great book. In fact, I think everything Green has written is pretty good. I have not read the 50th Law. I don't know if that's good or not. I've heard it is. But,
yeah, that's the only one of his I don't have.
Yeah, me too. Which is funny because everything else he's written is good. I wonder if it's just the fact that I'm not a big fan of 50 Cent. What would you say is the number one secret to success?
I'd say that the biggest thing is look in the mirror.
Inheriting a lot of money.
Look in the mirror and realize that you're the cause of your own misfortune. And once you come to those grips of reality, then you can start doing something about it. You can start learning. You can start growing and improving. But if you don't if you're not self-introspection, you know, you're not going to figure out what you're doing wrong. You know, if you're in denial, there's nobody who can help you. You know, so learn, ask questions, keep applying yourself, don't give up.
I like it.
Is the biggest secret is not really a secret. People just aren't aware of what they don't know they should do. You know, people have been doing successful things for decades, you know.
For more decades, since the beginning of human history, there's been successful people. And every single one of them has left some sort of trail. Especially.
Well, it's funny. Just the other night, I spent hours while working on another book that I'm plugging away at. I was listening to the audiobook of Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, and it was written in the 1930s, and everything he said, even though times were different, technology was radically different, the principles of success are the same. They haven't changed over the years. People thinking and reaction and acting have not changed. So how you deal with them and grow and learn is still vital to study the secrets of the masters that left their wisdom behind.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, the first caveman to figure out that you could take a rock or a stick and hit an animal and come home with twice as many animals, boom, there was the world's first entrepreneur. Yeah. Like, wow, I figured this out, you know?
It's, people do not change. I guess over a time span of, you know, maybe tens of thousands of years, perhaps. But for the most part, people do not change. And I hear a lot of talk about how politics is crazier than it's ever been. Obviously, you've never read a biography from the 1900s because it was exactly the same. People were just as horrible then as they are now. It's you know, forgetfulness of past orthodoxies. It's
right.
Exactly. None of our politics involve overthrowing governments.
Not
I mean,
at least not our own.
The more times change, the more they stay the same. Technology improves, but people don't. You know, a lot anyway.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling to me. It's in today's age, especially. You mentioned technology. We have information, more information than we could possibly process at our fingertips at all times. Yet, instead of trying to figure out how to better their lives, people spend thousands of hours playing Candy Crush.
Right. Right. I mean, we have the world at our fingertips and knowledge and information on our cell phones beyond the greatest libraries of the past. And yet people are more interested in posting photos of what they ate for dinner on Instagram than they are trying to figure out how to solve their life's problems.
Yeah, I used to call that the yummy coffee post. It's like you could talk about anything under the sun, and you have made an entire post dedicated to your coffee that literally is being done millions of times today.
Yeah. I mean, people will sometimes get on me that I constantly post links to my books or a new painting I'm trying to sell, or, that I only use social media to market myself. And I'm like, well, I'm not on social media to debate with people and waste my time or see, the trivial little crap that's going on. I don't even pay much attention to the news. I'm too busy producing. It's the idea that you shouldn't just sit around and watch the news. You should be making the news yourself.
Yeah, I really try to avoid political discussions, and another big one that recently came up is the latest Star Wars movie. Everyone's debating back and forth. It was awesome.
I haven't seen it yet.
It was awesome. It was horrible. And
I may never see it. I don't care.
I have. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, but I have a lot better shit to do than to argue whether or not someone else liked the movie. I don't care if you liked the movie. I don't care if you didn't like the movie. And what I think of the movie is irrelevant. It's a 2-hour piece of entertainment. If you didn't enjoy it, that's fine. If you did, that's great. But get the fuck on with your life.
Yeah, is your life so insignificant that you'll spend hours or days debating on somebody else's life accomplishments' value?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So speaking of producing,
yes,
Eric, tell us what you're working on.
Well, right now I'm working on the book that pretty much started my thinking on self-improvement. It's my and my co-author's life story woven into the different practical aspects of what to do to change and grow. It's where we got the idea to do the Limitless Potential Speakers Group. It's a book called Limitless, Getting Back to the Top After You Hit Rock Bottom. And it's highlights of a lot of different self-help books that I've written or worked on, and just kind of distilled into different chapters to either help people get back up on their feet if they're down, or if they've never had success in the first place. What's the things that I've learned in going from nothing to something? And it was a lot of deeply emotional scars I had to pull open and think about, which I tried to bury a long time ago because, like I said, I don't dwell on the bad things of the past. I got over it, but I realized that sometimes you have to share a little of what you had to do to get past those things in order to relate to other people and help them get through the same issues so that they feel there's hope for them too. So look for Limitless, Getting to the Top After Hitting Rock Bottom. Should be out in less than 2 months, and I'll be offering some special savings promos on it on social media.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Anything else you got going on?
Other than keeping Dark Moon Press running, it's growing constantly. We're up to 50 authors and 250 books. I'm really proud to say that it started from one, and now we're read in 14 different countries. And so it's kind of become a passive income stream for me because it kind of runs itself now with all the people I have, so that I can focus more on the public speaking aspect and, travel and make more money for my skill of what I have in my head. And that's one of the things I encourage people to do is, find something you're good at and find a way to market it with the least amount of trading hours for dollars and get paid well for what you're good at. because that's the only way you're really going to find success is not work so damn hard for pennies.
How long did it take you to build up Dark Moon Press?
It's been 14 years now.
14 years.
Yeah.
It's I think that's important for people to hear.
It wasn't overnight. Yeah, it's been a labor of love. It was a growing process. It was learning. It was me putting my nose to the grindstone. I learned public speaking. I learned marketing. I became more aware of what it takes to time management, to travel for what I do. So, it's kind of like I laid the foundation for my new business by doing the old one.
When you were building up Dark Moon Press, did you, like, when you had that first book and that first author, which was you, I assume, did you know, like, hey, I'm going to build this into a publishing company with 250 books? Did you know?
I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And that's the thing. Sometimes you stumble upon the thing that's going to make you the most happy and successful, that gets you going into other directions. Just because you believe in yourself, you have a passion for something, and you make your hobby into your living, so you're enjoying what you do. And that's one of the parting tips I could give people out there is everybody's got to work for what they want. You don't have to go to a job you hate in order to do that.
Love it.
It's great advice.
Eric, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to come on the program and hopefully help some people out there. And
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.
Satan.
Thank you guys for having me on.
Anytime.